Thanks, Albert.
I don't need to say
All right.
anything.
By the way, it's interesting when I come to a MediaPost event, I may have more tattoos, but I'm not as cool as the people who've been on stage so far. Like, I got a lot of catching up to do, so I can't even keep my sneakers as clean as Adrian does. All right, enough of that. We're going to dive into this conversation. Let's quickly go down the line and allow you to each do a quick introduction. I think, Adrian, everybody's met you because of the previous session, but Lee, do you want to kick it off?
Hi, Lee Tran. I'm based here in Austin. I'm the owner, founder of Stiletto Collective. We're a boutique agency in town.
I'm Orlin Nikiforov, SVP at OMG 23. We're a bespoke agency for the Disney business across theatrical networks and brand. So everything other than parks, which is what everyone thinks of first.
Excellent. So we're going to just dive right into this. So I listened to the previous conversation around digital out of home. Albert and I were also just talking about it before or during the break. And we had one prep call, which I didn't want to dive into too extensively, but we did a good job of finding out that we don't agree on the very first part of this topic, which is the best way to have a conversation. I started out the conversation saying that if digital out of home is a high attention media format, does including it in the conversation around programmatic devalue digital out of home and put it in line with what could be the lowest common denominator, which is display? Because most people do not have a positive view of display. They think about programmatic as a means of buying display, even though, yes, you can buy television and some other things. But having digital out of home in that space, does it devalue the perception of that media format? Anybody can feel that. Lee's got the quickest one to go. So.
Yes, I think I said it doesn't devalue it, because I think of our real case studies with clients like, if you know Rita's Italian Ice, they were based in Philly or started in Philly. They are a QSR by all means, but they're into frozen treats, so custard, Italian ice, frozen treats. And for us, obviously, knowing what the product is, weather is a major factor. And families are really important for us. So they're not quite everywhere. They're very localized, and they have a high density in Philly, in the Northeast, but Florida, Texas, it's different. And so digital out of home allows us the ability to leverage weather for our advertising, as well as leverage just the footprint that we have. So for us, that idea of programmatic helps us reach that scale in the markets that we need to be in.
I took sort of the dissenting opinion on this, and I look at it from an entertainment perspective and kind of the value that out of home has for us, which we've touched on, but I think allowing greater access to the medium can devalue it, and I think I've seen this personally kind of more recently in the cinema space specifically. Once the NCMs of the world started to open up to programmatic, they were in the DSPs. That is a really kind of premium format by nature, right? Like it's not cheap to buy cinema. It reaches people in a very specific kind of captive environment, and I've seen the quality of advertising dip significantly by being available to more people in a more granular way, and that in turn devalues it for everybody else, right? So that's kind of the perspective that I have on that.
I'm going to take
You're on. Yep.
I'm going to take a little bit of a middle path here. I think programmatic is such a loaded term now that even if it has inherent benefit, it connotates so many negative things that it's forced even the company I work for in Group M to stop calling it programmatic digital out of home and call it advanced digital out of home. I think overall it has the benefits outweigh everything that could be done on a negative basis, but what we need to do is ultimately have responsibility. If programmatic is done irresponsibly, it's chaos, and it's ultimately devalues any media that you would try to buy. I think having, I would say, gated access to premium formats in programmatic, not putting things that are the prestige and the iconic inventory types in the open exchange is just a no-brainer for me. Like, don't do that to almost create a situation where, to Orlin's point, anybody can buy it and it becomes less special by a token. And also, given the specialized nature of out of home, you do want to have more of a one-to-one connection between the brand and the partners, at the tech partners, as well as the media owner, to make sure that you're optimizing the experience of the actual advert for the consumer to make sure it's effective. Because if you're just repurposing a mobile banner to throw on out of home, forget it. Like, just don't bother.
So the programmatic component, if you look at the sentence for what we're talking about, that's really implied in the post-silo planning mix, right? You're no longer separate silo. You're no longer being planned off to the left or to the right of the rest of the campaign media. But let's look at the second part of the sentence where it's about the attention stack. Where does the attention stack overlap with the ad tech stack? Because maybe it's in programmatic, but to your point, Adrian, maybe there's a partition inside of programmatic that still allows for creative to be explored, to find new ways to actually go tell a story in a more robust fashion in digital out of home. But what is the overlap between the attention stack and the ad tech stack? Are there certain tools? Are there certain platforms or teams even that you think are involved in the planning process? Or let's start with you.
I think that successful out of home requires an expertise, and so I think that building specific for out of home is key, and so kind of democratizing it, for lack of a better word, it can be detrimental. So I think that we still do operate in a somewhat siloed perspective. So, I think building creative specific to out of home is paramount, because the creative kind of leads everything in the conversation for us.
So in your eyes, it is an attention stack issue, but you think the attention stack is still relatively separate from the traditional ad tech stack? Apparently, you really do.
I really do, yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, I think it's attention is inherently the most important thing that we all try to reach, right? But it's all creative driven. I think that the right spot will get attention.
Yeah.
And it's our purpose to find the medium for it, but it's creative driven.
Well, and I know Lee, I live in town, so I've seen some of the stuff that you all do. I've seen it here, and I've actually seen it in town. You figured out how to be very creative, but still, to your point earlier, take advantage of the scalability of programmatic and the overall ad tech stack that's at your disposal, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I will actually, yes, I think a rose by any other name will smell as sweet, but looking at out of home as a
I think she
channel.
just called you a rose, but okay.
I think that, when we think of the classic static billboards, I would argue that, and I'm not technically trained in creative, but I have my opinion subjectively, there's a lot of billboards out there that are just terrible. Ambulance chaser type ads, etc. It's anywhere. Social media democratizes mom and pops to put up whatever they want out there. None of that's policed. So I think that's just part of any channel. But creatively, breaking down silos, I feel like with anything advanced, programmatic, connected, it requires us, if we're really trying to stand out and make an impact, to work with not just whether your media department is in silos still, but also creative. So I think where we really have embraced advanced programmatic digital channels connected is when we come up with an idea together, whether it comes from media or creative, and then we figure out how to bring it to life. And so things like data partners and even tapping into social media and getting it real time into digital ads, like that has its time and place and moment and helps become something that is memorable, not just seeking attention, but actually memorable. We did this out-of-home campaign for a meat company in Chicago. It was tailgate season. We were tying around MLB, but we weren't a partner. And we really tried to come up with creative that was already kind of created whether they did well, weren't doing well, if they went into overtime, and have that ready to actually become, become real time in the market. And that was a direct collaboration also with our actual partner. So I do feel like looking at what's available through an ad tech stack as well as what's available, grabbing attention, that works really well when you collaborate together.
You had something you were going to add to a minute ago.
Yeah, I echo Lee's sentiment about the collaboration being key. I think attention overall is just very fickle with consumers and marketers alike, and trying to make sure that we can capture attention of, out of home being front of mind for activation of the campaign requires agility. And then that goes to Orlin's point, like if you're going to start with a creative idea, it's not specific necessarily to out of home, it maybe starts with a TV ad. How are you going to use the tools at your disposal to adapt that to something that you can deploy at scale in your channel? Programmatic, ad tech, like that allows for that to happen. DCO wasn't available at scale across the market until it's now available with the PXs and Vistars of the world. That enables you to do things in out of home you could only otherwise do in mobile and TV, etc. That opens us up to more investment, to more eyeballs, more attention. I think we have to make use of that with the collaboration with experts to make sure you're capitalizing on it. Otherwise, again, you're going to have what I think Albert had referred to earlier is like this commoditization, like AI generated content that is just slop.
Sure.
And it's a problem that's already affecting the online world. We don't want to see it come into out of home. So it's really important, again, responsible use of the technology and not fall into the pitfalls other channels have.
Yeah. It's not a really good conversation about any form of media unless you start to think about how it's going to be measured as well. If we're talking about attention, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago here in Austin, attention is a very intangible metric. It's sort of like one of those things, you know what it is when you see it, but you don't really know what it is until you see it, because I would argue you can't have engagement unless you captured attention. Pretty easy statement to make. For digital out of home, how are you all looking at measuring attention, and is that the same kind of measurement of attention that other formats can have inside that stack or inside of a media mix?
I'll go first. It's interesting. Billups, I think just this week, announced their own attention metric scoring for out of home, and we always approach that with a little bit of caution because it starts to undercut some of the core audience currencies and values we have around how you approach out of home units. I think it's fine to have your own qualitative metrics, but they should work in unison, not against. As far as like how we look to derive the effectiveness of out of home, we try to apply as many measures of measurement as we can, particularly where we're using ad tech, where there's an ad tech cost to do so, and you have to show the efficacy of doing that approach versus just buying direct. Again, dependent on the client and what is capable within the space, it will be all the known ones, the footfall to store location. We're dabbling in things that are less commonly done, like search uplift and search trends, not just across kind of like general portals and websites, but within specific retail environments. Like, has this not only driven sales in a market, but driven your Amazon store search traffic and seen a lift in sales there? And
I'm sorry, that's really interesting though, because what you're doing is you're once again going out of this siloed planning model, out of a siloed measurement model, to try and figure out what's the correlative value of one media format to the other, right?
Without a doubt, and that's part of what has been so fundamental to us being able to tap into that is integrating the teams better into the programmatic stack.
For a second. Turn the microphones off, please. Les, just turn them off. We're going to have you guys speak without the microphone.
You know what? Just drop the mic.
It's not working. Please don't drop the mic. Just continue your conversations, and if you can't hear in the back, I'm sorry, but we'll do our best. Go ahead, Cory, and
right.
you're doing great.
Lee, I think you're up.
Continue on.
Yes. Can you hear me? Awesome. So I'm going to do a client plug, especially because you guys are all here in Austin. One of our clients is Rambler Sparkling Water. They're Austin-based. They hopefully will be national maybe next year, maybe 2026. But one of the things for us is from a consumer perspective, especially here in Austin, we're all about the Ramblin' spirit. Our creative is all about nostalgia, Americana, the 70s. So it's really interesting. We had a debate, when you talk to our clients about who they are, they're like, we're not a digital out-of-home brand. We are static bulletins because of what I just said. All that to say is, over time, we talked about planning together brand, client, creative. We're the official sparkling water of ACL Fest, whoever's going to go tomorrow. We have been for a couple of years. The first time we did it, we looked at digital out of home, which was contrary to the client's point of view of who they are. But we were trying to really press upon the fact that we're an awesome brand, we're the water, and we did we looked at countdown creative, which was really something to tap into the digital out of home. And also really important because the previous year, maybe there was a different competitor who was really activating everywhere in Austin. So for us, it was really important to talk about how we were the official water and building up that countdown. We knew that caught attention because we were doing that teaser, but that was all technically just word of mouth.
Yeah.
Just being based here in Austin, we didn't have anything measured. We didn't look at social chatter or anything like that. But everything that we do for Rambler, we try to track back into footfalls. People actually going to brick and mortar stores buying the product. And I'll do like one other little case here. We actually had a B2B program getting to a national level. Every single time we have a news retail distribution partner or recording them, we'll use digital out of home or out of home to literally try to be in front of the buyer. So we'll look at the headquarters for these companies, and literally the ask was, could we be, if the buyer's looking out their window, could they see their creative? If they're going into work, can they see the creative? And that was definitely we couldn't measure it until the buyer actually said, we saw that billboard, thanks for that grand gesture. So,
But even that measurement, you didn't solely do it out of home. You had other things that also factored in, and you were able to figure out the spend, the proximity, the impact on buying. Like, it was actually measured together,
yes,
right?
yes.
See, for us, attention is kind of that byproduct, right, which actually drives demand. So we're obviously, from an entertainment perspective, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? There's filmmakers, there's talent, there's executives, and there's the consumer, and there's competitors, and all of those play a part. And so attention for us is, I'm in a new movie and I saw my face on Sunset Boulevard, and,
Yep.
and I took a picture of, that's the key for the stakeholders in this. And then there's the consumer awareness, right? So our broad play is awareness, because we want as many people to see our content as possible. And actually, what's interesting, like, I'm really interested in a lot of the things that have been said here, and like the Scott's stuff, drilling down to your consumer is so important for so many brands. For us, like, everyone's our consumer, right?
Yeah.
We don't really care who you are. We want you to see our content.
Well, you have
So
big
it's
content,
very,
right? You work
very
on all the
different,
Marvel
right?
stuff,
It's
so everybody knows what that
for
is.
quad, right? So everyone's our target, and so we don't have to be as granular in a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And so attention for us is talent saw it. It's
Yeah.
and that drives demand, because hey, Ryan Reynolds saw his face on a billboard. Why didn't I see my face on a billboard, right? So
That sounds like a fun call to have.
so we have we have our stakeholders asking, why isn't there enough out of home?
Right.
And that's a very different demand than a lot of others.
We're going to ask one more question, then we'll go to actual audience questions, which will be fun without a mic as well. If you had to balance, okay, I give you 100 points to work with. What do you think is the balance to be able to garner attention with digital out of home when you factor in the creative versus the placement or location itself? What do you think is the weighting of that? 50-50, 70-30? Just out of curiosity, what do you think is the appropriate weighting to be able to be very effective with this format with those two variables? Adrian, you get to go first because you're closest.
I'm going to say it varies by size type. If I just break it
Okay.
into large, medium, and small, I think that in the case of small format, we consider that place-based, and particularly like retail media networks that have been talked about heavily today. I think that in that case, the placement takes.
Now, is there?
It's on and ready.
The other media in the environment. That's why we practice communication. And then the medium side, I think, is more than 50-50. Because high-level screens, street level, urban panels, etc. There's enough of a field of vision as you're walking down, down New York Street that it matters. But I'd say it's close to
I think there are a lot of nuances, but if I had to give an equate or a ratio, I'd say 60% creative and 40% placement. And then for me, it's not necessarily size, but sometimes it is like, is it video? Can the digital out of home carry video? Video, I think, is more memorable. Are there too many words on the, so I think the quality of the creative goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not a good thing to say as a media person, but I think
Pull
it's
that mic
probably
closer to you, I'm sorry.
70-30 creative, because you can have the best placement and have garbage creative and no one's going to remember it. It's just, I think the creative is more important.
Well, and lucky you work on a client that has a lot of great creative to work with, so.
I mean, we work with the most creative people in the world, right? Like, these are artists, and they think up something from out of the blue and make something out of it. But we also are shockingly constrained in what we can do because there are so many stakeholders. So, a lot of times we kind of get to this lowest common denominator creatively, which is a hindrance, right? Like, I think everyone hears Disney and they're like, yeah, like, you get to do so much cool stuff, but Disney as a brand, great. Then you have a filmmaker, then you have talent and what they've agreed to do from a marketing perspective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have 10 layers that you have to get through.
Right.
And so you end up with the boring movie poster that's got 17 faces on it with a title, and then that's it.
Right.
And so that's why we feel creative is so important. Like,
Got
when
it.
you get to that worst version of it, you're kind of constrained. So we celebrate the ones that are creative.
Well, let's open it up for questions. Anybody have a question for the audience? There's a couple on this side.
I think this is hot.
You're
This
gonna
is
need-
good.
I'm not answering questions.
Hi, how you doing? Rick with PJX Media. One thing that always occurs to me with this type of discussion is that there's a tendency to zero-sum game the value of an impression. And with out-of-home media, there's such a broad mix of formats. It's so much about context. Formats behave differently market to market. They're dispersed differently market to market. To the public, they can walk by, stand by, dwell time, drive by. There's a mix of that. How do you address that when you're buying programmatic digital out of home, which wants to zero sum the impressions as always being equal across the board, regardless of the format?
Yeah, great question. As far as the planning approach, it's very collaborative with the experts who know the channel best, right? So it's not happening that there is a junior planner for programmatic who buys, all media and just goes into a platform and says, hey, these are the screens I'm going to buy in. Because they come in at a cheaper CPM, I'm going to favor those ones. And we also have the same practice with our traders, because a lot of the omni-channel DSPs that we activate other media across, they ultimately, they engorge themselves on the cheaper, more available impressions. So again, the responsibility of the folks who are the experts in the business around digital out of home need to, effectively police that and help to curate what is going to be the best campaign for the client. The team that I used to lead, that is again now a little bit more dispersed across the business as we integrate, does exactly that, and we have it at 3 levels. So at the planning stage, at the actual activation stage where we're looking at the deployment of supply, and then with the actual traders themselves. So we can analyze it in campaign where we may want to favor certain formats, like if we did want large format and to have billboard or to have some of the premium street furniture, if we're not seeing enough actual delivery there, go back to the supply team to unlock supply to do that and not just let the platforms deliver wherever they see the impression. So again, responsibility at every level, of the activation will deliver the best outcome for the client.
Yeah, I think it's just being thoughtful in kind of how you're executing those impressions. I'll kind of talk about Rita's Italian Ice. Depending on the market, Philly, a lot of available inventory. Hilly, Harrisburg, Lebanon, Lancaster, York, Pennsylvania, maybe not a lot. So, we don't zero sum it, but we really look at sort of the footprint of the street corner, the community that we're in. But we just kind of closed out. They had never really done coffee. They launched one last year. But we just closed out pumpkin frozen coffee. And National Coffee Day was September 29th on the actual little last day of the promo. So we used digital out of home to kind of really help seed up to that moment in time versus always relying on social media for these national days. So, I like to think we don't zero sum them. We really think about the market and what the idea is, and value those impressions for what they're meant to be and what they're worth.
Yeah, I don't know that we treat them all equally. You asked the question specific to programmatic, which, we're not very active in that space. So it's kind of like the last in line for us. So our direct buys are in our priority locations and markets and all that. And so programmatic sort of is kind of the filler for us at this point. So it is a little bit of going to that zero sum. Like, it's going to be the lower tier markets where we sort of are like, we'll take the impression, and it's not a huge contributor to our bottom line. Like, speaking from a movie perspective, box office, 80% of box office is in the top 10 markets. Outside of that, you're just, long tail. So they're kind of all the same in that perspective. So, like, we'll look at the audience qualifiers that are built into the buy, but we don't really care if it's Des Moines or, St. Louis or whatever is outside the top 10. They're kind of all the same. The dollars are worth the same to us.
So I think we're going to wrap up, but two things I want to add at the very end. One is just that I think it's a really good conversation around the balance of attention and creative and location, all these things that have to be done. But I'll leave you with one little tiny story, which was I worked with a big fintech company at one point, and the CMO, after we had given her the whole plan to promote this fintech company, which wasn't based in one of the primary technology markets, it had an out-of-home and digital out-of-home component on it. And I remember very vividly where she said, I don't want to be the kind of brand that advertises in out-of-home. And I remember thinking about this because she said it, and I said, that doesn't make any sense. We're talking about the Bay Area and Austin and New York and Raleigh and tech hubs. And she's like, I don't see brands like that in out-of-home. And I remembered that she was from Philadelphia and Florida. And it is a lot of lawyers and personal injury and all that kind of stuff. So she associated the format with the type of advertiser. So I think we can't look past the fact that not just the creative and not just the location and not just the scalability of using stacks like programmatic, but you also have to figure out the perception of the platform itself. And people are going to start to see that. And you kind of still have to battle through that a little bit. So I think that's going to be a key component of being in a post-silo planning mix.
Yeah, I mean, out-of-home is a national footprint of the local media.
Very
right?
much so.
So, like, each market has its own personality, right? Like,
Yep.
LA is entertainment, New York is fashion,
Yep.
Chicago's CPG. Like, based on the industry in that market.
Yep.
Well, Milwaukee's got a lot of beer.
Yep.
Like,
Some places got a lot of personal injury lawyers. So, all right, thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause.